Her German shepherd suddenly started digging and refused to stop. The sky over Missoula hung low that afternoon, pressing down on everything. Evelyn Pierce walked out of a legal office with a thin envelope in her hand. 32 years of life reduced to paper. No house, no future she recognized. Just a truck, a quiet road north, and a German shepherd who refused to leave her side. She thought she was driving toward the end of something, until the dog stopped at the edge of the woods and began to dig. If you were in her place, with nothing left but a cabin in the middle of nowhere, would you stay or keep driving? The sky over Missoula hung low that afternoon, not dark enough to storm, not bright enough to feel like day, just a flat, dull gray that pressed down on everything, the buildings, the streets, the people moving through it. Evelyn Pierce stepped out of the glass doors of the legal office and paused on the sidewalk. For a moment, she didn't move. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing in the quiet voices, the polished wood table, the neat stacks of paper that had taken apart 32 years of her life without raising a single voice. In her hand was an envelope, thin, too thin. She turned it slightly, as if the weight might change if she looked at it from another angle. It didn't. The paper inside shifted with a soft whisper, the only sound it made. That was everything now. Her life reduced to a few pages she hadn't even fully read. A car passed on the street, tires hissing against damp pavement. Somewhere down the block, a traffic light clicked from red to green. A man in a dark jacket brushed past her shoulder without noticing her at all. Evelyn stayed where she was. She had expected something, a reaction, a crack, a moment where her chest would tighten or her throat would close or her eyes would burn. But there was nothing, just a quiet space where something used to be. After a while, she walked. Her steps were steady, not rushed, not slow, just automatic. Like her body already knew where to go, even if she didn't feel it. The parking lot sat behind the building, half full. A row of cars, a few empty spaces, a line of bare trees along the edge with branches that rattled softly in the wind. Her truck was exactly where she had left it. Faded blue paint, a dent along the passenger side door that had never been fixed. Rust starting to show along the wheel well. She stood beside it for a second. Then she opened the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old fabric and dog fur and something dry, like dust warmed by sunlight. The seat creaked as she slid in. Before she could even close the door, a weight shifted beside her. Coda. The German shepherd had been sitting upright in the passenger seat, watching through the window. Now he leaned toward her without hesitation, pressing his head gently against her arm. Not excited, not restless, just there. Evelyn closed the door and sat still, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other holding the envelope loosely in her lap. Coda's ears flicked once. He adjusted slightly, settling closer, his head still resting against her sleeve, as if he had decided that was where it needed to be. She stared through the windshield. The world outside looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago. Same cars, same buildings, same gray sky stretching low over everything. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. She let out a slow breath. "It's just paperwork," she said quietly. The words sounded thin the moment they left her mouth. Coda didn't move, didn't lift his head, just stayed there, warm and steady against her arm. She glanced down at the envelope again. Her name was printed on the front in clean, sharp letters. Beneath it, the name she had carried for over 3 decades. Pierce. It still looked right. That was the strange part. Nothing about it looked wrong. No red stamps, no harsh language. No sign that anything inside had taken apart the life she had built piece by piece over years she could no longer count without effort. 32 years. A house. Accounts. Savings she had thought were shared. Plans she had assumed were mutual. All of it. Already moved. Already signed. Already done. Not in one moment. Not in one fight. But slowly. Quietly. Paper by paper. Signature by signature. Until today, there had been nothing left to argue over. She tried to remember when it had started, when the accounts had changed, when the documents had shifted into his name, when the decisions had stopped being something they made together. Nothing came clearly. Just fragments, conversations she hadn't questioned, papers she had signed because it made things simpler, explanations that had sounded reasonable at the time. She had trusted the shape of her life, trusted that it was still what she thought it was. Her grip on the envelope tightened slightly. Still no anger, no surge of disbelief, just that same empty space. Coda shifted again, this time nudging her elbow with his nose. A quiet, deliberate movement, his way of checking in. She turned her head and looked at him. His eyes were calm, alert. Watching her, not the world outside. Waiting. "I know," she murmured, though she wasn't sure what she was answering. Her hand moved almost without thinking, resting against the side of his neck. His fur was thick, warm, familiar, the kind of solid thing that didn't change without warning. He leaned into her touch. Outside, a light drizzle had started. Small drops tapped against the windshield, slow at first, then gathering into a soft, steady pattern. Evelyn watched them slide down the glass. She should go somewhere. That thought came and went without urgency. There was no house waiting, no place that was still hers in the way that mattered. The realization didn't hit hard. It just settled, like everything else. She looked forward again, past the hood of the truck, past the empty parking spaces, past the low gray sky. Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the glass. Same face, same lines, same woman who had walked into that office an hour ago. Only now there was nothing behind her. No structure. No next step already planned. Just the road. And the dog beside her. Coda let out a slow breath, his body relaxing just enough to rest more fully against her arm. Evelyn adjusted her hand on the wheel. After a long moment, she started the engine. The truck shuddered slightly, then settled into a low, familiar hum. She didn't pull out right away, just sat there, listening, feeling the vibration of the engine through the seat, the steady weight of Coda beside her, the quiet rain tapping against the glass. No tears came. Not yet. Maybe not at all. She put the truck into gear, and finally, without looking back at the building behind her, Evelyn Pierce drove out of the parking lot, carrying everything she had left in one thin envelope and the silent understanding that something had ended, even if she hadn't fully felt it yet. The streets of Missoula passed by in slow, familiar pieces, a coffee shop on the corner where she used to stop on cold mornings, a hardware store with a faded sign that hadn't changed in years, the intersection where traffic always backed up around 5 in the evening. She stopped at a red light and waited. A couple crossed in front of her, laughing about something she couldn't hear. The man reached out and brushed rain off the woman's sleeve. It was a small gesture, easy, automatic. Evelyn watched them until the light changed. Then she drove on. She didn't have a destination. Not really. But her hands stayed steady on the wheel. Her eyes stayed on the road. Something in her had already chosen a direction, even if she hadn't said it out loud yet. The city thinned out behind her. Buildings gave way to open stretches of road. Traffic eased. The air shifted, cleaner, sharper, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Coda lifted his head slightly as the truck picked up speed. His ears moved, catching new sounds through the cracked window. Wind, tires on asphalt, something distant in the trees. Evelyn reached over and adjusted the heater without thinking. The envelope sat on the seat between them now. She didn't look at it again. An hour passed. Then another. The highway curved north, climbing slowly. The sky stayed the same dull gray, pressing low over the mountains. Rain came and went in light bursts, never heavy enough to matter, just enough to leave a sheen on the road. At a small gas station outside a town she didn't bother reading the sign for, she pulled in. The place was quiet. One pump working. A pickup parked near the entrance. A dog tied loosely to a post, watching the world with bored patience. Evelyn turned off the engine. For a moment, she sat there again, the silence settling in around her. Coda shifted beside her, stretching his front legs before stepping down carefully onto the ground when she opened the door. The air was colder here. She could feel it right away. It slipped through her coat, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of pine needles and damp gravel. She filled the tank without rushing. The sound of fuel flowing was steady. Predictable. It gave her something to focus on. Inside the small store, a man behind the counter nodded once as she stepped in. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to make conversation. She bought a bottle of water, a wrapped sandwich she wasn't sure she'd eat. Back outside, Coda stood near the truck, watching the trees beyond the lot, always watching. "Ready?" she said quietly. His ears flicked. That was enough. They got back in. The engine turned over. The road opened ahead again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She turned off the highway just before dusk. The sign marking the road was half hidden behind branches, weathered, easy to miss if you didn't know it was there. But she knew. The gravel road stretched out in front of her, narrow and uneven. Potholes filled with rainwater. Mud pressed flat by tires that hadn't passed through in days, maybe weeks. The truck bumped as she eased forward. Slower now. The trees closed in on both sides. Tall pines, thick trunks. The kind of forest that swallowed sound instead of carrying it. Coda sat upright again. More alert this time. His nose lifted slightly toward the open window, taking in the scent of something older, wilder. Evelyn tightened her grip on the wheel just a little. She hadn't been here in years. Not since... She stopped the thought before it formed completely. The road curved, climbed, narrowed even more. At one point, branches scraped along the side of the truck with a dry, dragging sound. She didn't slow down, just kept going. The light was fading when the cabin finally came into view. It sat back from the road, half hidden behind a line of trees that had grown thicker since the last time she'd seen it. For a second, she didn't recognize it. Then she did. And she stopped the truck. The engine idled quietly. She stared. The porch sagged slightly to one side. One of the support beams leaned at an angle that didn't look right. The windows were dark, one of them patched from the inside with something that looked like old cardboard. The roof still held, barely. Weeds had grown up along the steps, tall enough to brush against the wood. It looked smaller than she remembered, and older. "Yeah," she said under her breath. "That's about right." She turned off the engine. The silence that followed was immediate. No traffic, no distant noise, just wind moving through the trees, low and steady. Coda jumped down from the truck before she even opened her door. He moved straight toward the cabin, slow and deliberate. Not rushing, not wandering, working. His nose stayed low at first, tracing the edge of the steps, the corners of the porch. Then he circled wider, moving along the side of the building, disappearing briefly behind it. Evelyn stepped out and closed the door. The air felt different here. Colder. Still. She pulled her coat tighter and stood for a moment, watching. Coda reappeared from the back of the cabin, trotting at an even pace. He paused at the base of the steps and looked up at her. Not excited, not cautious. Just waiting. As if to say it was what it was. Evelyn walked toward him. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Not because of fear, because of recognition. She climbed the steps slowly, testing each one before putting her full weight down. The wood creaked, but it held. At the door, she reached into her coat pocket. The key was still there. She hadn't been sure it would be. It was cold in her hand. She turned it in the lock. It stuck at first. Then, with a small, stubborn twist, it gave. The door opened with a dry, dragging sound. The smell hit her immediately. Dust, old wood, something faintly damp, time sitting still for too long. Coda moved past her without hesitation. Inside first. His nails clicked softly against the floor as he walked from one room to the next, checking corners, doorways, shadows. Evelyn stood in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust. The last light of day filtered through the dirty windows, casting a dull, uneven glow across the floor. Furniture sat where it had been left. A table, a chair pushed halfway back, a shelf with a few scattered items still on it. Nothing had been touched. Nothing had moved. It was as if someone had simply stepped out and never come back. Coda returned to the doorway. He sat, looked up at her. Still, quiet, certain. Evelyn stepped inside. The floor creaked under her weight. She closed the door behind her, and for the first time since leaving the parking lot in Missoula, the thought settled fully into place. This wasn't temporary. There wasn't another stop after this. This cabin, broken, silent, barely holding together, was the only place left. She stood there for a long moment. Then she set the envelope down on the table without opening it. Coda shifted closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against her leg. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again. Inside, nothing else moved at all. And Evelyn Pierce, without saying it out loud, understood exactly where she had ended up. The quiet settled in slowly, not all at once, not heavy, just present. Coda stood a few steps inside the room, his ears turning toward every small sound, the soft shift of wood, the faint rattle of a loose window frame, the wind brushing along the outside walls. Evelyn stayed near the door for a moment longer. Then she moved. The floor creaked under her weight. Each step gave a little, as if the boards were remembering how to carry someone again. She crossed to the table. The envelope lay where she had placed it, untouched. It looked smaller now against the rough wood, almost like it didn't belong here at all. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she set the bottle of water beside it. The wrapped sandwich followed. Simple, practical movements. Things that didn't require thinking. Coda moved through the cabin again, slower this time. He pushed open a half-closed door with his nose, paused, stepped inside. His nails tapped against the floor, then stopped. A moment later, he came back out, clear. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't noticed she was holding. "Guess that's everything," she said quietly. Her voice sounded different in here, softer, absorbed by the walls instead of echoing. She pulled her coat tighter and looked around. Dust had settled over everything in a thin, even layer. It softened edges, covered details, made the whole place feel paused. There was a broom leaning in the corner. She walked over, picked it up, and tested the weight in her hand. The bristles were worn, but still intact. It was something. She started with the floor, slow, steady strokes, pushing dust toward the door, watching it gather into small, gray lines that moved with each pass. The sound was quiet, repetitive. It gave the room a rhythm. Coda lay down near the doorway, watching her. His head rested on his paws, but his eyes stayed open, tracking her movement from one side of the room to the other. Every so often, his ears flicked toward something outside, but he didn't get up. Not yet. Time passed without her noticing how much. The light shifted slowly through the windows, turning from dull gray to something thinner, colder. Evening coming in without much color. Evelyn stopped sweeping and leaned the broom back against the wall. Her shoulders ached slightly. That was new, or maybe just something she hadn't paid attention to in a while. She moved to the stove. It sat against the far wall, blackened from years of use. The door hung slightly crooked. The pipe leading up through the ceiling had a faint bend in it that didn't look right. She opened the stove door. Ash. Old. Cold. Undisturbed. She crouched down, reaching inside with her hand. The ash shifted easily, light and dry. No heat left. Not even a trace. She closed the door again. "We'll fix that," she said, more to herself than anything else. Coda lifted his head at the sound of her voice, then lowered it again when she didn't move. The room cooled quickly as the light faded. Evelyn stood there for a moment, then walked back to the table and picked up the sandwich. She unwrapped it carefully. The smell was faint but familiar. Bread, meat, something simple. She took a bite, chewed slowly, standing. There was no reason to sit. Coda watched her for a second, then rested his head back down. She ate half of it, wrapped the rest, set it aside. The water bottle came next. A few slow swallows. Enough. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. It moved through the trees with a low, steady sound. Not loud, but constant. Evelyn walked to the window. She wiped a small section of glass with the sleeve of her coat, clearing just enough to see through. The trees stood close, dark shapes against a fading sky. The gravel road barely visible beyond them. No lights. No movement. Nothing. She stood there longer than she meant to. Then she turned away. The bedroom door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, the air felt even stiller. A narrow bed sat against the wall. The mattress thin, slightly uneven. A blanket folded at the foot, stiff with disuse. A dresser stood near the corner, one drawer pulled halfway open. She stepped inside. Coda followed this time, moving ahead of her, checking the corners, the space beneath the bed, the closet door that hung slightly ajar. Satisfied, he turned once and lay down near the doorway. Guarding. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. It held. That was enough. She reached down and pulled off her boots, set them neatly beside the bed without thinking. Her coat stayed on. The room felt colder than the main area. The walls thinner, maybe, or just less protected. She leaned back slowly. The ceiling above her was cracked in one corner, a thin line running across the wood like something that had been there for a long time. Her eyes followed it for a moment, then closed. Sleep didn't come right away. Her body was still too alert, listening to the wind, to the quiet shift of wood as the temperature dropped, to Coda's breathing, slow, steady, just a few feet away. That sound grounded everything else. At some point, she drifted, not deep, Not fully, just enough to lose track of time. She woke once. No reason. Just awake. The room was darker now, the kind of dark that fills everything evenly. Koda was already on his feet. He stood near the door, ears forward, body still, listening. Evelyn pushed herself up slightly. "What is it?" she whispered. Koda didn't move. A few seconds passed. Then the sound came. Faint, branches shifting outside. A soft scrape along the side of the cabin. Something moving through the trees. Not loud, but close enough to notice. Evelyn sat still, waited. The sound passed, moved farther away, faded. Koda stayed where he was for a moment longer. Then slowly, he relaxed, turned, came back to the bed. He didn't jump up this time, just lay down beside it, close enough that she could reach him if she wanted. Evelyn lowered herself back down. Her hand dropped over the edge of the bed, resting lightly against his back. Warm. Solid. There. Her breathing slowed. The tension in her chest eased just enough. This time, sleep came a little easier. Not deep, not peaceful, but enough. Outside, the wind continued through the trees. Inside, the cabin held together, and Evelyn Pierce, lying in a place she hadn't planned to return to, understood something without needing to put it into words. She wasn't leaving in the morning. There was nowhere else to go, and, for now, that was enough reason to stay. Morning came quietly. Not with sunlight, not at first, just a slow thinning of the dark. The kind that seeps in through the edges of the windows before the sky decides what it's going to be. Evelyn opened her eyes. For a second, she didn't remember where she was. Then the ceiling came into focus. The crack in the corner. The faint outline of the window frame. The smell of old wood and cooled air. It settled back in. She sat up slowly. Her body protested, shoulders stiff, lower back tight from the thin mattress. She pressed a hand against her side and waited for the feeling to pass. Koda was already awake. He stood near the doorway again, facing the main room. His ears shifted slightly as she moved. "Morning," she said. Her voice sounded clearer today, still quiet, but steadier. Koda turned his head just enough to acknowledge her, then looked back toward the front of the cabin, always watching. Evelyn swung her legs off the bed and slipped her boots back on. The floor was colder this morning. The chill had settled in overnight and stayed. She stepped into the main room. The light outside had grown a little stronger, pale, flat. The sky still held that same dull gray from the day before. Nothing had changed. And yet, something felt different. Not better, just more defined. She moved to the stove first, opened the door again. Still ash, still cold. She crouched down and brushed a small pile aside, exposing the metal beneath. It was solid. Good enough. "We'll get that going," she muttered. Koda shifted slightly behind her, then walked past her toward the door. Evelyn glanced back. "Yeah, I know." She stood and followed him. The door opened with that same dry pull as before. The air outside felt sharper now, cleaner. It filled her lungs in a way the cabin couldn't. Koda stepped out first. This time he didn't just circle the immediate area. He moved farther, past the steps, into the tall grass that brushed against his legs. His nose stayed low, tracing lines she couldn't see. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching. The land behind the cabin sloped gently upward toward a line of trees. Beyond that, the forest thickened, darker and quieter. She pulled her coat tighter. For a few minutes, everything felt still again. Just wind in the trees, just Koda moving through the grass, Then something shifted. It was small, easy to miss. Coda stopped. Completely. His body went rigid, ears forward, head slightly lowered. Evelyn straightened. "What is it?" No answer, of course. Coda took a few slow steps forward, then stopped again. His focus narrowed to a single point near the edge of the tree line, a patch of ground that looked no different from anything around it. Evelyn stepped down from the porch. Her boots sank slightly into the damp earth as she moved toward him. "Coda." He didn't look back, didn't move toward her, didn't respond at all. That wasn't like him. He was trained, responsive, attentive, but right now, none of that mattered. Something had his attention, something stronger than her voice. Evelyn slowed as she approached. The ground here felt different under her feet. Firmer, packed tighter, not soft like the rest of the yard. She noticed it without fully thinking about it. Coda lowered his head, and then, without warning, he started digging. Not playful, not casual, hard, fast. His front paws tore into the soil, sending clumps of dirt backward in sharp bursts. His breathing changed, quick and focused. "Coda." "Hey." Evelyn stepped closer. He didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. The sound of his claws hitting the ground was sharp, rhythmic, dirt scattering, roots snapping under the force. "Coda!" She reached out, grabbing lightly at the back of his collar. For a split second, he paused, turned his head just enough to look at her. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not fear, not excitement. Intensity. Then he pulled forward again, stronger this time, and kept digging. Evelyn let go. She stepped back instead. Watched. Something about it told her not to interrupt. Not yet. The hole grew quickly, a few inches at first, then deeper. The soil changed color slightly as he dug, darker underneath, more compacted. Small stones mixed into it. Not natural. Evelyn crouched down beside him now. Her hand brushed against the edge of the disturbed earth. Cold. Dense. She started clearing some of the dirt away herself. Slower. More careful. Coda worked beside her, relentless. Then, a sound. Different. Dull. A sharp, hollow clink that didn't belong in dirt. Coda froze. His paws stopped mid-motion. Evelyn felt it too. Not just the sound, but the shift that came with it. She leaned in closer. Used both hands now, brushing away loose soil. More of it came into view. Not rock. Too smooth. Too flat. Her fingers traced along the surface. Metal. Cold. Solid. Buried. She sat back slightly, breathing shallow. "What on earth?" Coda stood over the spot, staring down into the shallow hole as if waiting for something to move. Evelyn wiped her hands on her coat, then reached back in. Cleared more dirt. Edges began to appear. Straight lines. Defined corners. Whatever it was, it had been placed here. Not fallen. Not grown. Placed. And then covered. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Not fear. Not yet. Something closer to recognition. Like she had stepped into something already in motion. Coda shifted closer to her side. Not digging anymore. Just watching. Waiting. Evelyn sat there in the cold morning air, hands still covered in dirt, staring at the piece of metal hidden beneath decades of earth. The cabin stood behind her. Quiet. Still. and for the first time since she arrived, something about this place felt like it had been waiting, not empty, not forgotten, waiting. Evelyn drew in a slow breath, then reached forward again and started clearing more of the dirt away. The soil came loose in uneven chunks, not soft, not natural. It resisted her at first, like it had been pressed down and left to settle for a long time. Her fingers scraped against small stones, bits of root, compacted layers that didn't match the rest of the ground. Coda stood close beside her, no longer digging, just watching. His body leaned slightly forward, weight balanced, ready. His eyes stayed fixed on the spot where her hands worked. Evelyn pushed harder. She grabbed a broken branch nearby and used it to pry at the edges, loosening the dirt faster. The wood snapped once, but she kept going, switching angles, using whatever leverage she could find. Piece by piece, the shape revealed itself. Flat, wide, not large but deliberate. She brushed away another layer and sat back on her heels. A rectangle. Clear now. The surface was dull, coated in grime and time, but unmistakable. Steel. "Someone put this here," she said under her breath. The words felt strange in the open air. Coda's ears flicked at her voice and then returned forward again. Evelyn wiped her hands against her jeans and leaned in closer. Her fingers traced along the edge. There was a seam. Tight. Fitted. This wasn't scrap metal. It wasn't debris. It was a door. Her breath slowed. For a moment, she didn't move. The wind shifted through the trees, brushing past her shoulders, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The cabin behind her remained silent. Everything felt still, like the moment before something changes. Coda shifted beside her, stepping closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against her arm, grounding her. Evelyn nodded slightly, though she wasn't sure why. Then she reached back in, cleared more dirt along the edges. The full outline emerged now. A steel hatch, maybe 3 feet wide, set flush into the ground. The corners were reinforced, the edges sealed tight. Whoever had placed it here had meant for it to stay. She sat back again, her hands resting on her thighs. "This doesn't make any sense," she murmured. Coda huffed softly through his nose. Evelyn glanced at him. "You knew it was here?" He didn't react, of course, but he didn't look away from the hatch either. She leaned forward again, slower this time, more careful. Her fingers searched along the surface until they found it. A handle. Recessed into the steel, nearly invisible beneath the dirt until she cleared the last of it away. She paused. Her hand hovered over it. Cold air pressed against her skin, even without touching it yet. Not fear, not quite. Something deeper. A hesitation that didn't come from logic. More like instinct. Coda let out a low, quiet sound. Not a growl. Not a warning. Just awareness. Evelyn swallowed, then wrapped her fingers around the handle. It didn't move at first. The metal felt stiff, locked in place by time and pressure. She pulled harder, shifting her weight back. Nothing. She let go, exhaled slowly. "All right." She stood up and looked around. There had to be something. Her eyes landed on a rusted shovel leaning against the side of the cabin, half buried in weeds. She hadn't noticed it before. She walked over, pulled it free, and brought it back. Coda stayed where he was, guarding the spot. Evelyn wedged the edge of the shovel into the seam along the hatch, pressed down. The metal groaned faintly, not loud, but enough. She adjusted her footing, planted one boot firmly, and pushed harder. The shovel bent slightly under the strain. Then, a sharp crack. Dry. Breaking. The seal gave. Evelyn froze for a second. then slowly eased the shovel back. The hatch had shifted. Barely, but enough to break whatever had held it closed. She set the shovel aside and crouched down again. This time, when she gripped the handle, it moved. Heavy, resistant, but moving. She pulled. The hatch lifted an inch, then two, then more. A deep, hollow sound echoed up from beneath it, like air being disturbed for the first time in years. Then it opened enough to release it. A breath of cold air rushed upward. Not just cold, stale, trapped. It carried a smell with it. Damp concrete, old metal, something faintly chemical. A scent that didn't belong outside. Evelyn instinctively leaned back. Coda stepped back too, his ears flattening for a brief second before rising again. They both stared at the opening. Dark, completely. Evelyn stood slowly. Her heart beat just a little faster now. Not panic, but awareness. She stepped closer again, careful this time. The hatch rested open at an angle, heavy but stable. She looked down. At first there was nothing, just darkness. Then her eyes adjusted. Shapes began to form. A narrow shaft, concrete walls, and a ladder, metal, bolted into one side, leading down, farther than she expected. She let out a slow breath. "What is this?" Her voice barely carried. Coda moved to her side again. He didn't try to go down, didn't lean in, just stood there, watching. Evelyn rubbed her hands together, brushing off the last of the dirt. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, from something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. A sense that this mattered. That whatever was down there wasn't random, wasn't forgotten. She stepped back from the edge, looked toward the cabin, then back at the hatch. The decision hung there, quiet, unspoken. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Coda shifted again, pressing lightly against her leg. Evelyn nodded once. "Yeah," she said softly. "Not like this." She walked back to the cabin, grabbed the flashlight she had tossed onto the table the night before. When she returned, the hatch was still open. The darkness below unchanged. Waiting. She clicked the flashlight on. The beam cut through the shadows, reaching down the shaft, touching the ladder, the concrete floor below, and something else. Shapes, objects, covered, stored, not empty. Evelyn stood at the edge, the light steady in her hand, Coda beside her. The cold air from below brushed against her face again. This time she didn't step back. She looked down, longer, deeper, and for the first time since she arrived at the cabin. The numbness was gone, replaced by something sharper, something that pulled her forward instead of holding her still. She tightened her grip on the flashlight and took a step closer to the edge. The beam cut clean through the darkness now, stronger, steadier. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, angling the light deeper into the shaft. The ladder stretched down farther than she had first thought. Metal rungs spaced evenly, bolted into the concrete wall with precision. Not makeshift, built, carefully. Her eyes followed the beam downward. The floor came into view. Flat, gray, solid. And beyond it, shapes. Covered, stacked, ordered. Her pulse shifted. Not faster, sharper. Coda stood beside her, his body still, ears forward. He didn't bark, didn't move ahead. He was waiting. Evelyn took a slow breath. Then, without speaking, she placed one hand on the edge of the hatch and lowered her boot onto the first rung. The metal felt cold, firm. It held her weight without a sound. She paused, listened. Nothing. No movement below, no shifting air. Just that faint, enclosed stillness rising up from beneath the ground. She moved down another rung, then another. The flashlight beam bounced slightly with each step, catching pieces of the concrete walls, smooth, uncracked, poured with care. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't something someone threw together. It had been planned. Halfway down, she stopped again. Coda let out a low sound above her. She looked up. He stood at the edge of the hatch, looking down at her, his silhouette framed against the gray sky. "It's all right," she said softly. Her voice sounded different here, contained, pulled inward by the walls. Coda didn't move, but he didn't leave either. Evelyn turned back and continued down. Her boots touched the concrete floor. A fine layer of dust lifted slightly around them, disturbed for the first time in years. The air was colder here, heavier. It carried that same smell she had noticed before. Old metal, sealed space, something preserved. She stepped off the ladder, turned slowly. The flashlight beam swept across the room, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. The space was larger than she expected. Not huge, but deliberate. The walls were reinforced, the ceiling low but stable, lined with pipes that ran toward a vent she couldn't fully see. To her left, shelving. Metal racks, still intact, holding rows of containers, some sealed, some labeled, though the ink had faded. To her right, wooden crates, stacked too high, uniform, stenciled markings barely visible beneath dust and time. Straight ahead, a table, metal legs, wooden top, and on it, papers. Not scattered, arranged, like someone had left them there on purpose. Evelyn stepped forward slowly, each movement careful, measured. The room didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, as if whoever had built this place had expected to come back. Coda's nails clicked softly against the ladder above. Evelyn glanced back. He was descending now. Carefully, one step at a time. His body lowered, his movements controlled, as if he understood the space required caution. When he reached the floor, he didn't rush ahead. He circled once, nose low, checking the air, the corners. Then he came to her side and stayed there. Evelyn reached out and rested her hand briefly against his shoulder. "Good," she murmured. Then she turned back to the table. The flashlight beam settled on the papers. She stepped closer. The top sheet was yellowed with age, edges curled slightly. But the writing was still there. Clear, precise, handwritten. Her breath caught. She knew that handwriting. Not immediately, but enough. Something about the shape of the letters, the spacing, the pressure. Familiar. She picked up the page. The paper felt fragile. She handled it carefully. Dates, numbers, lists, supplies, maintenance notes. Her eyes moved faster now, scanning, trying to make sense of it. Then, a name. Written at the bottom of one page. Simple, unmistakable. Daniel Pierce, her brother. Evelyn froze. The room seemed to narrow slightly around her. Daniel. She hadn't said his name out loud in years, not because she didn't remember, but because there had never been much to say. He had been quiet, distant, always working on something, always somewhere else even when he was in the same room. She had never fully understood him. And then, he was gone. Just like that. An accident, they said. Years ago, quick, unavoidable. Evelyn stared at the name again. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. "You built this?" she whispered. Coda shifted beside her. The sound brought her back. She set the paper down carefully and moved to the crates, knelt beside one, ran her hand across the surface. Dust coated her fingers. She wiped it away. Letters appeared, faded but still readable. Emergency supply unit. She frowned slightly, opened the crate. Inside, equipment, organized, packed tightly. Tools, flashlights, batteries sealed in plastic, medical kits, unused, preserved. She moved to another crate, opened it. More supplies, different types, food containers, water filters, blankets sealed in tight wrapping. Everything had a place. Everything had been prepared for something. Evelyn stood slowly. Her mind worked through it piece by piece. Her brother, the quiet one, the one no one really questioned because he never offered much explanation. He had been coming out here, working, building, maintaining, all this time, and she had never known. Coda walked toward the far wall, paused, sniffed along the base, then sat, watching. Evelyn followed the movement with her eyes, then looked back at the table, at the papers, at the careful order of everything in this room. A different feeling settled in now. Not shock, not confusion. Something quieter he had known. Not what would happen, but that something could. That people might need this. That someone might need this. Evelyn picked up another page. Read slower this time. Notes about repairs. Ventilation checks. Supply rotations. Dates that stretched back decades. He hadn't just built it. He had kept it alive, long after anyone else would have walked away. She lowered the paper, looked around the room again. This time, not as a stranger, but as someone standing inside a piece of a life she had never seen clearly before. Coda came back to her side. Sat. Still. Present. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The air felt different now. Less foreign. More understood. She looked toward the ladder, the hatch above, the gray light filtering down faintly from the world she had come from, then back at the bunker, at everything her brother had left behind. And something shifted inside her. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to change how she stood, how she breathed, how she looked at the space around her. Evelyn Pierce wasn't just standing in an old cabin anymore. She was standing inside something her family had built and left unfinished. She lowered the flashlight slightly, and for the first time since she stepped onto this land, she didn't feel like she had arrived at the end of something. She felt like she had stepped into the middle of it. The bunker held its silence, but it wasn't empty anymore. Evelyn stood there a while longer, the flashlight resting loosely in her hand, her eyes moving slowly across the shelves, the crates, the table. Her brother had left this behind, not as a memory, not as something sentimental, as something useful. That part stayed with her. She turned toward the ladder. "Coda," she said quietly. He was already watching her. Always ahead of her now, it seemed. She climbed up first this time, slower, more aware of the weight of each step. The metal rungs didn't creak. The structure didn't shift. It held her without question. When she reached the top, the air felt different, lighter, but thinner somehow. Coda followed right behind, pulling himself up with a quiet strength that made no sound except the faint scrape of claws against metal. Once both were back above ground, Evelyn stood beside the open hatch and looked down again. The darkness didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't just a hole, it was a place. She lowered the hatch halfway, not closing it, not yet. Then she walked back toward the cabin. Her steps had changed, still steady, but no longer automatic. Inside, the space felt smaller than before, more temporary. She set the flashlight on the table, next to the envelope she still hadn't opened again. Her eyes passed over it, then moved on. There was work to do. She went straight to the stove, opened it, looked inside again. This time she didn't just observe, she acted. Outside, she gathered dry branches, what little she could find under the trees where the ground had stayed protected from the rain. Coda followed her closely, moving in wider arcs, scanning, returning. Every so often, he stopped, listened, then kept moving. Evelyn worked without rushing, without overthinking. Small pieces at first, kindling, then larger wood. Back inside, she cleared the old ash properly this time, using a piece of scrap metal she found leaning behind the stove. The motion was familiar. Her hands remembered. Not perfectly, but enough. She struck a match, held it to the edge of the kindling, waited. The flame caught slowly, then grew. A thin line of smoke rose, hesitated, then pulled upward through the pipe. It worked. Not clean, not perfect, but working. Evelyn sat back on her heels and watched the fire take hold. Coda lay down a few feet away, his body angled toward the door, but his eyes flicking back to her. The cabin shifted slightly as the heat began to spread. The air softened, just enough. She stayed there until the fire steadied, then stood. The next hours passed differently than the ones before. There was a pattern now, a reason for each movement. She cleaned the table fully, wiped down the surface, cleared away old debris, set her few items neatly to one side. She checked the windows, secured what she could, propped one frame back into place using a piece of wood cut from outside. It wasn't pretty, but it held. Coda moved with her, not in the way of a restless animal, in the way of something that understood the space mattered now. He checked the door each time she moved deeper into the room, paused at the corners, returned, always within reach. By afternoon, the cabin had changed, not completely, but enough that it no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. Evelyn stepped outside again. The sky had cleared slightly, letting through a pale strip of light near the horizon. The trees stood still now. The wind had eased. She looked toward the hatch. Still open. Still waiting. She walked back up the slope. Coda moved ahead this time, reaching the hatch first, sitting beside it as if guarding it. Evelyn stood there, hands on her hips, breathing slow. Then she went back down. This time there was no hesitation, no pause at the top. She descended with purpose. At the bottom, the air greeted her differently. Still cold, still still, but not unfamiliar anymore. She set the flashlight on the table and began. Not exploring, working. She moved the papers carefully into a stack, brushed dust from the surface, organized what she could understand. The crates came next. She opened each one again. Slower, more deliberate. Taking inventory. Recognizing patterns. Medical kits. Tools. Supplies. Her hands paused over the medical case. She opened it. Inside. Everything was intact. Bandages, instruments, antiseptic. Old, but preserved. Her fingers hovered there a moment longer. Something in her chest shifted. Not sharp, not painful, just remembered. She closed the case gently, moved on. Coda wandered the perimeter again, then settled near the ladder, his body angled toward the opening above, watching both directions. Hours passed. Evelyn didn't notice how many. Only that the space slowly came back to life under her hands. By the time she climbed back up, the light outside had faded again. Evening. The cabin greeted her with warmth this time. The fire still burning. The air no longer biting cold. She closed the door behind her. Coda shook himself once, then moved to his usual place near the entrance. Evelyn sat down at the table. For the first time since she arrived, she sat. Really sat. Not because she was too tired to stand, but because there was a reason to stop. Her hands rested on the wood. Rough, solid, real. The envelope sat just a few inches away. She looked at it, then past it, out the window, into the fading light. A sound came from outside. Footsteps, faint, unsteady. Coda's head snapped up instantly. His body went rigid. Then he moved, not barking, not aggressive, just fast, to the door. Evelyn stood, every part of her alert now. The sound came again, closer. A voice, low, strained. "Hello?" Evelyn crossed the room and opened the door. A man stood just beyond the porch, middle-aged, maybe older, his jacket torn at the sleeve, one hand pressed against his side. Blood. Not heavy, but enough. He started, then paused to catch his breath. "Didn't think anyone was up here." Coda stood between them, not blocking, but present. Evelyn stepped forward. "Come inside," she said. No hesitation. The man nodded, relief passing over his face as he stepped onto the porch. Coda moved aside, but stayed close, watching. Evelyn guided the man to the chair, sat him down. Her hands moved without pause, without thought. She reached for the medical kit she had brought up earlier, opened it, cleaned the wound, wrapped it, checked the pressure. Her movements were steady, precise, familiar. The man winced once, then relaxed as she worked. "Fell," he muttered. "Back on the trail. Thought I could make it back down before dark." "You won't," Evelyn said quietly. "Not tonight." He didn't argue, didn't need to. When she finished, she stepped back. Coda had settled near the door again, watching both of them now. Evelyn looked down at her hands, then back at the man, then around the cabin. Something had changed. Not outside, inside. And this time, it wasn't something being taken away. It was something coming back. The man stayed the night. There wasn't much discussion about it. Evelyn made space the only way she could. A blanket near the stove, a chair pulled closer to the warmth, a cup of water placed within reach. Coda never fully relaxed. He didn't growl, didn't challenge. But he stayed between the man and the door, watching with that same quiet focus. By morning, the man looked better. Color had returned to his face. The tightness in his breathing had eased. Evelyn checked the bandage once more. "Keep it clean," she said. "Don't push it." He nodded, careful as he stood. "Name's Walter," he added after a moment. "Didn't catch yours." "Evelyn." He glanced around the cabin. "You up here alone?" Evelyn hesitated just a fraction, then nodded. Walter looked toward Coda. Not entirely. Coda didn't move. Walter gave a small, tired smile. Well, I appreciate it. Not many people would have opened that door. Evelyn didn't respond. She just stepped aside and let him leave. Coda followed him out onto the porch, watching until the man disappeared down the gravel path, moving slower than before, but steady. Only when he was out of sight did Coda return inside. The door closed. The cabin settled again. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. Something had shifted. Word spread. Not loudly. Not all at once, but quietly. The way things move through places where people pay attention. A man helped on a back trail. An old cabin with smoke coming from the chimney again. A dog that didn't leave the doorway. Evelyn noticed it in small ways. A truck passing slower than it needed to. A distant figure at the edge of the trees one afternoon, gone before she could make out who it was. Footprints near the road that hadn't been there the day before. She didn't go looking for it. She didn't invite it. But she didn't shut it out either. Days passed. Her routine settled in deeper. Mornings started with the stove, then water, then the slow work of restoring what could be restored. The bunker became part of that rhythm. She moved between the cabin and the hatch without hesitation now. Down the ladder, across the concrete floor, organizing, cleaning, understanding more each time. Coda always stayed close, sometimes above, sometimes below, but always aware, always tracking the space around them. Evelyn found herself speaking more down there. Not full conversations, just quiet words, observations, questions that didn't need answers. Why didn't you tell me? The question slipped out once as she stood over the table, holding one of her brother's notebooks. It stayed in the air, unanswered, but not empty. By the end of the week, the place looked different. Not new, but maintained. Alive again. That's when the SUV came. It didn't belong. Evelyn knew that before she even saw it clearly. The sound reached her first. Low, controlled. Tires moving over gravel with a smoothness that didn't match the road. Coda heard it too. His head lifted instantly. Body still. Then he moved. Not toward the door. Toward her. Standing just slightly ahead. Positioning. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch. The vehicle came into view slowly, turning the bend in the road. Black. Clean. Out of place against the trees, the dirt, the quiet. It stopped in front of the cabin. The engine idled for a moment, then shut off. The door opened. Calvin stepped out. He looked exactly the same. That was the first thing she noticed. Same posture, same controlled movements, same way of looking at things as if measuring them. He closed the door behind him, looked up at the cabin, then at her. Evelyn. His voice carried easily across the space. Neutral, carefully balanced. She didn't answer right away. Coda stood beside her, still, watching. Calvin took a few steps forward. Not too close, not yet. I heard you came out here, he said. Didn't expect you to stay this long. Evelyn leaned one hand against the porch railing. Didn't expect it either. He nodded once. His eyes moved past her, scanning the cabin, the repairs, the chimney smoke, then past that, toward the tree line, toward the hill, where the hatch lay hidden from view, but not from someone who knew where to look. I've been getting calls, he said after a moment. People talk. Evelyn didn't move. About what? Calvin hesitated just slightly. Then, About something you found. Coda's ears shifted. Evelyn felt it more than saw it. The tension changed. Subtle, but clear. She stepped down from the porch. One step, then another. Coda followed, staying close at her side. "What do you want, Calvin?" He exhaled slowly, not frustrated, measured. "I want to understand what's going on here," he said. "If there's something on this land, something valuable, we should talk about it." We. The word landed hard. Evelyn almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. "We don't have anything to talk about," she said. Calvin's jaw tightened just slightly. "Evelyn, don't make this harder than it needs to be. If there's infrastructure here, government ties, old contracts, this could turn into something complicated. Legally." He stepped closer now, still controlled, still careful. "But it doesn't have to be. We can handle it the right way." Evelyn watched him, really watched him, for the first time in a long time, not as someone she needed to understand, but as someone standing outside her life. "You mean your way?" she said quietly. Calvin didn't answer, didn't need to. It was already there, between them. Coda shifted slightly. Just enough. A low, almost silent presence that made Calvin stop where he was. Evelyn noticed. She placed a hand lightly against Coda's back. "Stay," she murmured. Coda didn't move, but the message held. Evelyn stepped forward one more time, closing the distance, not aggressively, just enough to make the line clear. "You made your decisions," she said. "You handled everything the way you wanted." Calvin's expression flickered, just for a second, then settled again. "That was different." "No," Evelyn said. "It wasn't." The wind moved through the trees again, soft, steady, carrying the scent of the land she now stood on. Her land. "You don't get to come here now," she continued, "and act like we're still working together." Calvin's gaze hardened slightly. "I'm trying to keep this from becoming a problem." "It already was," she said. Silence. The kind that doesn't need filling. Coda remained still beside her, grounded, present. Calvin looked at her for a long moment, then toward the cabin, then back again. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not understanding. Calculation. He stepped back. Not retreating, just adjusting. "This isn't over," he said. Evelyn didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't follow. She simply stood where she was, Coda beside her, the cabin behind her, the land holding steady under her feet. Calvin turned, walked back to the SUV. The engine started. The vehicle reversed slowly, then turned and disappeared back down the road the way it came. The sound faded. The quiet returned. Evelyn stood there a moment longer, then exhaled. Not sharply, not with relief, just steady. Coda looked up at her. She rested her hand against his head. "Yeah," she said softly. He didn't need more than that. She turned back toward the cabin. The door still open, the fire still burning inside, and for the first time, she didn't feel like something was about to be taken from her again. She felt like she had something worth holding on to. The change didn't announce itself. It came quietly. The air shifted first, cooler in the mornings, sharper by evening, the kind of cold that didn't settle on the surface. It moved through the ground, into the walls, into the bones of the place. Evelyn noticed it in the way the fire needed more tending, in how the wind carried differently through the trees, in how Coda paused longer at the edge of the yard, listening. Something was coming. She didn't check a forecast. Didn't need to. The land told her. 3 days after Calvin left, the sky turned heavy again. Not gray like before. Darker. Layered. The kind that pressed down with weight. By late afternoon, the first flakes came. Slow. Sparse. Barely noticeable at first. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching them fall through the trees. Coda stood beside her, still as ever. "Guess it's starting," she murmured. He didn't move, but his ears tracked something far beyond what she could hear. The snow didn't stay light for long. Within an hour, it thickened. Wind picked up. The flakes turned sideways, cutting across the yard in fast, sharp lines. Evelyn moved quickly then. No hesitation. She stepped back inside and reached for her coat. "Coda." He followed instantly. They went to the hatch. She didn't think about it. Just acted. The steel door lifted easier now, the seal already broken from before. Cold air rushed up again. But this time, it felt familiar. Expected. Evelyn climbed down first. Coda followed. Inside, the bunker held steady. The air was still, protected. She moved through it with purpose. Lanterns, supplies, blankets, everything she had already begun organizing. Now it mattered. Above them, the wind howled. The sound filtered down faintly through the structure. Distant, but constant. Evelyn climbed back up once more. The snow had turned into a storm. Visibility dropped. The trees blurred together in white and gray. She scanned the road. At first, nothing. Then, movement. A shape. A figure pushing through the snow, hunched against the wind. Evelyn stepped forward. "Hey!" The figure turned. A man. Not Walter. Someone else. Younger. Face red from the cold. "There's more," he called out, voice breaking through the wind. "Down the road. Car won't start." Evelyn didn't wait. "Bring them up here." He nodded and disappeared back into the white. Coda stood at the edge of the porch, body tense, waiting. Minutes passed. Then shapes emerged. 3, then 5, then more. A family first. A woman holding a child wrapped in a blanket. A man pushing behind them, guiding. Another figure behind them. Then 2 more. They moved slowly, fighting the wind, slipping on the snow-covered ground. Evelyn stepped down to meet them. "Inside," she said, voice steady. "One at a time." No panic, no confusion, just direction. Coda moved ahead of them, positioning himself near the hatch, standing solid, a point of focus in the storm. The first child hesitated at the edge. Coda stepped closer. Not pushing, just there. The child reached out, grabbing a handful of his fur, and climbed down. Evelyn helped guide them, one by one. Careful, controlled. The ladder filled, then cleared, then filled again. More people arrived. An older man leaning heavily on another. A woman with shaking hands. 2 teenagers trying to act calm but failing. Evelyn moved between them all. "Slow down. Watch your step. You're okay." Her voice didn't rise, didn't rush. It held. And they followed it. Inside the bunker, the space filled. Bodies, breath, movement. The quiet stillness from before shifted into something alive, urgent, but contained. Evelyn moved through it, lighting lanterns, distributing blankets, directing people to sit along the walls. "Stay close. Keep warm. You're safe here." Coda stayed near the ladder, watching every person come down, then circling once, checking the room, before returning to the entrance again. Always guarding. The storm above roared louder now, a deep, constant force, but down here, It couldn't touch them. Time blurred, minutes into hours. Evelyn checked on each person. The older man, cold but stable. The child, warming slowly. The young man who had first arrived, shaking but breathing steady now. She moved without hesitation, without second-guessing. Her hands remembered. Her mind stayed clear. This wasn't new. It was something she had done before. Maybe not here. Maybe not like this. But the shape of it. It fit. At some point, the generator came to life. A low hum filled the space. Lights flickered, then steadied, soft, warm. A quiet murmur moved through the group. Relief. Evelyn stood still for just a second, letting it settle, then moved again. Coda made his rounds, slowly, stopping near each person, letting them reach out, touch, hold on to something solid, something real. The storm lasted through the night. No one slept deeply, but no one was alone. Evelyn stayed near the center, watching, listening, responding. Every movement deliberate, every decision clear. Above them, the world shifted under the weight of snow and wind. But below, the bunker held, just like it had been built to do, just like her brother had intended. And now, for the first time since she found it, it was being used. Not as a secret, not as a memory, but as something that mattered. Near dawn, the wind began to ease. Slowly, the sound softened. The pressure lifted. Evelyn noticed it before anyone said a word. She looked toward the ladder, then back at the people around her, all of them still there, all of them breathing, safe. Coda stood beside her, still alert, but calmer now. Evelyn rested her hand on his head. "You did good," she whispered. His tail moved once. The room settled into a quiet that felt different. Not empty, not tense, just held. And Evelyn, standing in the center of it, understood something without needing to say it out loud. This place had always been meant for this, and so had she. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly. First, the sound of the wind easing. Not gone, just softer. Then the faint shift in the air. Less pressure, less weight pressing down from above. Evelyn stood near the ladder, listening. The bunker had grown quiet. Not silent, but calm. People rested where they could. Some leaned against the walls. Others sat wrapped in blankets, eyes half closed, breathing slower now. Coda lay near the entrance, his head resting on his paws, but his eyes still open. Watching. Always watching. Evelyn reached up and touched the ladder. Cold metal. Solid. She climbed. Each step felt different than the night before. Lighter. Not easier. Just clearer. When she pushed the hatch open, daylight met her. Pale at first. Then brighter. The storm had passed. Snow covered everything. Thick, undisturbed. The trees stood heavy with it, branches bowed but unbroken. The air held that clean, sharp stillness that only comes after something has moved through and left its mark. Evelyn stepped out onto the ground. Her boots sank into the snow with a soft, heavy sound. She stood there for a moment, breathing, looking. The world had changed, not destroyed, not taken apart. Just reset. Footsteps behind her. She turned. One by one, people began to climb out of the bunker. Slow, careful, blinking in the light. The child from the night before stepped up first, still wrapped in the blanket. He looked around, wide-eyed, then down at the ground, as if making sure it was real. The others followed. The older man, the woman who had held the child, the young man who had first come through the storm. Each of them paused at the top, looked around, then back at the hatch, at the place that had held them through the night. No one spoke at first. There wasn't a need. Evelyn stood a few steps away, giving them space. Coda came up last. He stepped onto the snow and shook once, sending a light spray of frost into the air. Then he moved to Evelyn's side and sat, right where he belonged. The man who had first arrived stepped forward. "Thank you," he said. Simple, direct. Evelyn nodded. "That's what it's there for." He glanced toward the hill, then back at her. "You built that?" Evelyn shook her head. "No." She didn't explain further. Didn't need to. The others began to gather themselves, adjusting coats, checking on each other. Quiet voices, low and steady. No panic, no rush, just movement. They left the way they came, slowly, carefully. One group at a time. Evelyn watched until the last of them disappeared down the road, their footprints marking a path through the snow. Then the quiet returned. Different now. Not empty. Full. Coda stood and stretched, then walked a slow circle around the yard before returning to her side. Evelyn looked toward the hatch, still open, still waiting. She walked over and stood at the edge, looked down. The bunker was still there, just as it had been, but it didn't feel hidden anymore. It didn't feel like a secret. It felt used, like something that had finally been allowed to do what it was meant to do. Evelyn lowered the hatch carefully, not sealing it, just resting it in place. She turned and walked back toward the cabin, each step steady, each movement unhurried. Inside, the fire had burned low but steady. The room held warmth, faint but real. She added another log, watched the flame catch again. Coda lay down near the door, settling in. Evelyn moved to the table. The envelope was still there, exactly where she had left it, untouched. She picked it up this time, turned it over in her hands. The paper inside shifted slightly, same as before. But it didn't feel the same. Not heavier, not lighter, just smaller. She set it back down, not with hesitation, with finality. Her eyes moved to the window. The snow reflected the light, filling the room with a soft glow. The land stretched out beyond it. Quiet, open, no longer unfamiliar. Evelyn stepped outside again. Coda followed. The air bit at her cheeks, but she didn't pull her coat tighter this time. She stood on the porch, looked out, the road, the trees, the hill where the bunker lay beneath the surface. All of it connected now. All of it hers in a way nothing else had been. Not given, not shared. Built. Earned. She rested her hand on Coda's head. "You knew," she said quietly. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. His presence had always been the answer. Evelyn let out a slow breath, the kind that settles deep, the kind that doesn't come from relief, but from understanding. She hadn't come here to start over. She hadn't come here with a plan. She had come because there was nowhere else left. But what she found wasn't just the cabin, wasn't just the bunker. It was something that had been buried long before she ever stepped onto this land. Something she had set aside, given up, or maybe just forgotten. The ability to stand on her own, to decide, to act, to be needed. Not because someone allowed it, but because it was simply who she was. Evelyn looked out across the snow one more time. The wind moved lightly through the trees. The world held steady, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel like something was missing. She felt like she had finally found where she belonged. Sometimes, what we think we've lost isn't gone. It's just been buried, waiting for the right moment, for the right place, for the right reason to be found again. She stood there a long time after that, not thinking, not planning, just listening to the quiet way the snow held the land still, to the faint shift of Coda's weight beside her, to the absence of everything that used to fill her head.
It wasn't the storm that stayed with her, it was the moment before it ended. 18 people down there in the dark, just in a place they couldn't see, and a woman now, because the door had been opened when they needed it. And Coda, he hadn't waited for her to understand any of it. He didn't ask what the meant to mean, or why the master, or whether she was ready. He just kept digging until something buried couldn't stay buried anymore. Evelyn looked out across the white grounds, where footprints had already begun to fade. All those years, she thought she had been holding a life together. Turned out, she only been standing inside something that was slowly being taken apart. This was different. This didn't depend on anyone else staying. She reached down and rested her hand on Coda's neck. You didn't find that bunker, she said softly. You found me. He leaned into her, like that was obvious, and maybe it was, because how many times in our life do we walk past something that could change everything? No one ever showed us where to dig. So let me ask you this. If something in your life had been buried along, would you even know where to start?